Hi everybody, thank you for being here. Today I'm going to show you some basic watercolor techniques such as a gradient wash and a flat wash, some basic strokes to make leaves, and we're going to also use some masking tape and learn some textures with salt and spraying paint. All you need for this is a couple small round brushes and some paint, which is yellow, blue, and a dark gray, like a Paynes gray or a black, and some masking fluid. But if you don't have masking fluid, that's okay. You can paint around and just follow along. Gradated wash is a wash where you start off dark and it gets lighter and lighter. And you want it to be pretty even. Sometimes you don't, but I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration. So I put down some thick, very pigmented color with my brush, and then I swoosh it across, and then I dip my brush in water and I go back and swoosh it across again. And every time I want to get it lighter, I dip it in water and swoosh it across again. So this works actually pretty good, except for my edges were kind of it was pulling there. So I'm just going to go back and just bring my brush all the way to the top, and it should like fix that. There we go. So all is not lost, and the more you practice, the better you are. So here I'm adding a little bit more water to the bottom and just extending my gradient. And if you let that sit, it should all, since it's so wet, just blend together very nicely and give you a very nice gradated wash. And this is on a Canson XL paper to practice. I think that's a great practice paper. Now here we're doing a flat wash, and I'm just using my paint very pigmented, and it's the same consistency all the way through. I'm not dipping it back in water. If you want to fill an area, you want to mix your color ahead of time and then just fill that area evenly with water. A lot of times people bleed it on the bottom. It's like a little bead, and they keep moving that bead down and adding more to that bead. And that's for big areas, but for small areas you can get away with just bringing your brush back and forth pretty quickly. And here I demonstrated a few of the petals we're going to be doing today, or the leaves I should say, and I'll show you more in 1 second how we do those. I changed my camera angle because I thought my hand was always in the way. I don't have the best lighting, but I'm trying my best here. Now I'm using a number 4 brush, and it's a round number 4 brush, and I'm just going to dip my brush in and just load it up with a nice, pretty consistent paint, not too thick and not too thin, and just draw a line, and I'm going to press down and lift. Then you're going to do it again. You're going to press down and lift. And then you're going to keep trying this over and over again. Press down and lift. So I'm going at different angles. I'm pretty used to it. I do have carpal tunnel, so my hand gets a little tired sometimes. I make mistakes. But it's just muscle memory. So if you sit there and practice this over and over again, you are going to just be able to. And once you've mastered the straight leaf, you can start, twisting and turning your brush to make leaves that are curled or turned under or something like that. So just here I am using a scrap piece of paper. Don't waste your paper. I mean, you can use these for other purposes. You can make them into a collage or something else if you like. So, the more you practice, the better you are. And like I said, it's muscle memory, and all of these little scrap pieces are from old paintings and, my practice pieces. And I think I keep them, and I think that I can come back and use them for other collage projects, or crafting, or whatever you want to use them for. The paper I'm using for this project is a hot pressed Arches paper, but you go ahead and use whatever you like. The Canson XL regular paper is just fine for this project, especially if you're just practicing. And when you get better, you can buy more expensive paper and use that. And I'm mixing my yellow here, but I realize there's some blue in it, so I'm going to go clean that out and make it so my yellow is more pure. So now we're going to practice doing our flat wash in this moon shape or this circle shape. and it's going to be just sort of a Japanese feel. I did not use any reference for this painting. It's just kind of out of my head. I just wanted to show you some techniques. So here I am mixing a very light yellow color, and I am just making it kind of watery. And you want to mix the whole batch that you're going to use, because when you're doing a flat wash, you want to keep dipping into the same mixture and make sure it's consistently mixed. Now, I don't always practice what I preach, and I'm always in a hurry, so I'm using my brush here and I'm carefully getting it to the edge of my circle, and that's a lot of practice too, trying to get inside the lines of something. So I'm using a really good brush. It comes to a really good point and it holds water. That's usually the Princeton brushes. I think this is a Velvet Touch, and they have a really good line of brushes that are synthetic and they work really well. So here I am. I'm just basically using the same color yellow and filling in that circle. For some reason today, my house is very dry, and I'm noticing my watercolors are drying very fast before I can even get to work them. So I kind of reworked this here. But that's another factor in watercolors, is if you have a humid day, your watercolors take forever to dry and you want to get something done and you can't. Or the trouble I'm having here, and I just left it for you to see because I thought, well, it's not exactly doing what I want it to do, and I realize it's because it's drying too fast. So I just re-wet the whole surface again, and then I lay down just a light color yet again. Yeah, and it looks really good. So the other thing in watercolor is a lot of people think that, you make a mistake, that's it, you got to start all over. No, you don't. You can always find a way, or almost always find a way, to work around it and fix little mistakes or little mishaps, or something that doesn't go perfectly right. You can lift watercolor up and start over again, and you can, like here I'm drying it, I wet the whole thing and added more color. There's always ways to get around, and I will be showing you these techniques in all of my videos. So I gave my circle a quick dry with my heat gun or a hair dryer, or you could just let it air dry, but make sure it's completely dry. And then I went over and I erased all of my pencil lines that still showed up. And the thing is, this is hot press Arches paper, so it's smooth. And it tends to, if you get fingerprints on it, when you start painting, sometimes it resists the paints because your fingers could be oily a little bit. Your skin's, whatever oils you have on your skin will affect your watercolor paper. So it's something to keep in mind. So I'm using a brush here to move away my, all the eraser droppings that I have there. And I'm just going to go on now and show you how to do the gradated wash on the back of the painting. We're going to go around that circle, but before we do that, we're going to mask just the edges of the circle. So when we're doing our gradient wash, we're not going to get anything inside the circle. Now you could take the time to carefully paint around that circle, but I just use masking fluid. It's just so much easier, and it gives me a little bit of insurance because my hand is not so steady all the time, and I just feel like it's easier to have that little bit of masking fluid around the edge of my circle or any shape that you're working on. So one thing that masking fluid can do, and it depends on the pigment of your paint. Sometimes the paint is not as staining as other paint. So when I pull this off, you're going to notice that it does lift a little bit of the paint. So keep that in mind. You can practice ahead of time if you're really going to do a very well thought out painting. So here I am going back to my practice paper, and I'm just demonstrating one more time how to do these leaves while I'm waiting for my masking fluid to dry, because I tend to be very impatient and sometimes I want to start painting before my masking fluid is dry, and I literally ruin my painting because I didn't wait for my masking fluid to dry completely. So I thought, well, let me just practice a few more leaves while I'm patiently waiting for my masking fluid to dry. So I'm just going to lift the back of my board up, and this is, like I said, an Arches hot pressed block, and I just stuck like my Altoids tin back there. I just want it to be lifted up a little bit, and now I'm going to mix my darkest, it's like a Paynes gray color, and I'm just going to make it kind of a thick consistency, and I'm going to mix a lot of it because, well, it depends on how big your picture is, and I'm adding a little bit of blue to it, so it's like a bluish, beautiful bluish gray, like a night, dusky sky. And these are some of my favorite colors, and I'm just mixing it pretty thick because at the bottom of our painting is going to be the darkest part of our gradient, and we're going to make the gradient go all the way up to the moon, lighter and lighter. So here I am. I have a bigger brush now, and you can use like a mop brush, a really fat brush, something that's twice as wide, because you're trying to cover a large area. You really should do that. And here I am using a smaller brush. I think it's an 8. And I noticed by the time I got to the top of my painting, the paint on the bottom there was pretty dry, and I really wanted it to be completely wet. So what I'm doing is I'm going about less than a third of the way up with the same color. And I want it on the dark side. And then as I start to want it to get gradually lighter, I'm just going to dip my brush into the water and push off a little bit of that paint, and then go back on my painting and stroke it again. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit more water. I am pushing it off my brush at the edge of my bowl and grabbing more water, and just keep it on stroking to gradually make this gradient lighter and lighter as we get towards that moon shape. Now I'm starting to hit the moon shape, and as it's on the angle, those colors are going to blend together and make a beautiful gradient. And I'm going pretty fast, so if you go a little slower than me and use a bigger brush, like I said, you shouldn't have those little bandings going on that I see there, but it's okay. I kind of like it. This is the background of my painting, and I'm not too concerned with that. And you could also see that as I'm dripping water on my background, and it's making those little dots, which I also don't mind because we're going to add texture back there anyways. But if you didn't want that, keep your water away from your painting so that you don't drip by accident, because if you're trying to do a flat wash or something, you really don't want to drip. So for this demonstration, it's okay. So you can't really see where I am right now, but I'm just adding water, and it's pretty much the same color as it is around the moon. I'll just pull it out in a second. I get busy and sometimes I don't see that I'm not on camera all the way. And this is the second time I did this painting because I thought my hand was in the way on the last one. So you can see I just kind of went more and more around the moon shape, and I'm just adding just clear water there and trying to get it pretty even. And we're just going to let this dry. First, before we do that, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. So I keep a little bit of salt in a little Altoid tin, keep those Altoid tins because they're really useful for your watercolors. You could put like, you can make a mini travel watercolor case for yourself. I put my salt in it. I put the soap in it for my masking fluid. It's just really handy. So what we're going to do now is I put the salt on there. We're just going to let this dry completely. I waited a while and I came back and the salt looks beautiful, and I am removing the masking fluid with eraser. There is something that it's like it's an eraser we used to use in graphic design, and it's like, oh, I forgot the name of it, but it's like this beige eraser, and you could pick up all of this masking fluid very easily. And I haven't seen it in anywhere anymore. They just don't sell it anymore. But so just, you could use your fingers, but like I said, on the hot press, you might leave some fingerprints that might, you know, resist the water. So, but I don't really mind here because I kind of like the way, see it like lifted off a little bit of the edge paint in my circle, but I don't really mind. This is the moon, it's fine. And you could always paint over it again. So you can go and wet that whole area and just add another wash of color over it. And if it's not completely stained, if it was really staining color, that would not have lifted. So this is not probably a staining color, it's more sitting on the surface, and that's why some of it lifted up. But every paint pigment is different that way. I'm going to mix the bluish gray again, and I'm going to make it very light, and we're going to start adding in our branches and our leaves to this illustration. I mixed a very watery consistency of this blue, so it's very light, and I'm just brushing in my branches, and I'm going to put the leaves on there. I'm doing this out of my head. I didn't use a photo of any kind. I just wanted to really show you techniques today, and the techniques we learned today were a flat wash and a gradient wash. We added some texture with some salt while the paint was still wet, and we let that air dry, because if you were to dry it with a dryer, the salt might not change its, you know, do what it's doing chemically and make that beautiful bloom that you want. And or if you see that you like it so far, then add the dryer if you like, because it'll just keep going until it's completely dry. So we learned masking, so we masked around the sun after we painted it. So you can use masking fluid after you paint a color. It doesn't have to be always to preserve the white of the paper, although most people use it for that reason. But if you want to paint over a large area that you've already painted, a background area, make it easy for you to get the background in, you would want to mask out an area. Now, the way to do it, like we did this circle by doing just the edge, but if you had a big area, you could start the edge with the masking fluid and then add tape in the middle. But sometimes I notice that if you leave just a tiny little gap, it's going to show up if you put paint over it. So you got to make sure you got everything covered. You could put a piece of, you know, paper over it or plastic or something and tape the edges so it, you know it's masked completely. As long as it's sealed and the water can't get in, you're masking. Now another way to mask is like I have here, I have the washi tape on the edges. You could definitely mask with painter's tape. The blue painter's tape from the hardware store is really great because it has like less tack on it and it pulls off, because you don't want to pull the paint off your wall. So it's actually really good for this as well. It's less expensive than artist tape. So I added some leaves and branches to the top going down, and I'm adding some leaves and branches on the bottom area going up. So it's kind of a cute little painting, and I hope you're enjoying this. If you are, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. It's free. It's free lessons that I'm giving here. It helps me out a lot with YouTube, and please share it if you know any other watercolor artists or somebody who wants to learn watercolor. I try to keep these as simple as possible. And the next step on this, we are going to be doing the same exact thing, but we're going to be using a more saturated color of the same color. So we're just using more pigment. So those are the words we're learning too, is pigment, saturation, lightness and darkness, value, which is light to dark, that's your value. Your chroma is the actual pigment itself. So in art school, that's what you learn in color class. And here I am, I'm just adding more leaves and branches. They're in the background, and that is looking super cute already. I'm very happy with this. And I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this. I really love teaching. And if you have any suggestions for me or questions for me, please, put something in the comments so I can read it and just make my next classes something that I know you're going to want to watch. Okay, so now making my more saturated color. So I'm adding the blue and my Paynes grayish color together, and it's pretty dark. And we're going to do the same thing over again. As I'm painting these darker branches, I'm going to go a little slower because when I go fast, I'm a little careless and I make little mistakes and it's not perfect. But if you want to, just have a more precise painting, then just go a little bit slow, especially if you're not used to making those leaf shapes. So it'll be better if you went just a little bit slower. So you just put the tip down, bring it down, flatten it, and then lift it. So it's like start it, press it, and lift it. And you can turn it different ways to get your leaf shapes to go different ways. And nothing grows evenly, everything is growing in all different directions. And just try to make it look as natural as possible. If you need to get some reference of a bamboo or how leaves grow, have those pictures in front of you. But I'm kind of the nature girl, and I'm a gardener, so I kind of know the shapes of leaves and branches already. So they're also my interpretation and your interpretation. So your painting is going to look different than mine, and from anybody else that you may be painting with, theirs is going to be different as well. But I'm sure they're all going to be amazing. All right, I'm just going to speed this up just a little bit so you're not bored to tears watching me do this leaf shape over and over again. So you're hopefully painting along with me, and you're going to look up and we're both going to be finished together. So here I am just making those little leaf shapes darker and darker, and I think that looks so pretty, and it has just a beautiful effect of the leaves in the background and the leaves in the foreground. So in nature, anything that is further away obviously loses its color, and anything closer to you gets darker, but also anything that's closer to you. Now we're just using really two colors here, a bluish gray and a yellow. So anything that is closer to you, if you're doing a painting, usually is warmer. And anything that is further away from you is usually cooler in color. So when you go out in nature and you're just sitting around, just remember that and just try to be aware of it and look for it. Because if you're driving down the highway and you're looking at the hills as they're closer to you and the hills farther away, you're going to notice that the ones that are in the distance, they're blue or they're purple, and or a little grayish blue color, usually, unless it's the fall or something, and then they might be a fall color. But you will see that they really change color, and it's a much cooler color in the distance than it is at everything that is closer to you. So when you're driving and you're a passenger, not the driver itself, you try to pay attention to the color shifts. And that's a great way to observe, is like when you're driving or you're just, sitting in the woods, maybe at a pond or a lake or something, And it's very apparent and we don't realize it as humans. So we just live our life and we don't pay attention to these details around us, but they're quite amazing and they're quite beautiful, and you can capture all of that in your paintings. All right, so I'm finishing up my leaves, and for the rest of the painting, I'm going to use this handmade gold paint that I purchased. And I got it from Amazon, and I forget, my dog is barking. There must be somebody outside. But it's CSY Art Gallery Mini Tin Box, handmade watercolor. And I just wanted some sparkle in my paintings, and some, like if you're painting a butterfly or something, or I don't know, sometimes you just want to add a little bit of sparkle here and there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this color. I'm just going to get it wet and I'm going to splatter it on my painting. So the way you splatter is you get your brush pretty wet, and I'm adding the pigment to it, and I'm just going to tap it on top of my painting so it makes a splatter effect. Here's the paint. It's so pretty. And I'm going to really get it really good and wet. Get a lot loaded onto my brush. There you go. I'm using a bigger brush right here. I'm going to go practice on a little sheet of paper that I have nearby and make sure it's actually going to splatter for me. And sometimes you can use like a bristle brush or a toothbrush. So get a little toothbrush and stick it on there, and you can just like pull it back and then splatter it that way. That'll give a nice finer spray. But right now I don't have that near me, so I'm just going to tap my brush and let it just fall where it may. And it is actually really pretty. And then I'm going to take this pretty gold color and I'm just going to add it to my branches and some of my leaves. So like pretend this moonshine is hitting the top of the branches and possibly some of the leaves. I'm going to just accentuate some of the veins just here and there. I'm not going crazy with it. It's just a very subtle look. And after that, the painting is done. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from my classes here on YouTube. I love to teach, and I would love it if you would subscribe and actually tell me in the comments what you would like to see next, and I'll try my best to present that to you. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.